A room full of memories. The medals, the photographs, and yes, the trinkets from her travels that reminded us of our darling daughter, whose brief life shone so brightly. It's a fitting place to remember her. She opened the park to the public at the height of her fame in 1936, and she was treated just like a Hollywood movie star.
In brilliant sunshine, a crowd of 15,000 fans greeted Mrs. Amy Mollison and her husband Jim with a terrific cheer as the two famous aviators drove in an open car to the steps of Sowerby Hall, birthplace of the current Air Minister, Viscount Swinton. The women's orchestra struck up the popular tune, Amy, Wonderful Amy, and she told the crowds, "I am proud to come from Yorkshire. It is Yorkshire that is responsible for the spirit which makes me want to keep going."
And keep going she certainly did. Amy lived for nothing else. She bought herself flying lessons at the London Aeroplane Club and gained a pilot's A licence. With a second-hand Gypsy Moth biplane, which she called Jason, after the family business trademark, and with relatively little flying experience, she then surprised not just our family, but the whole world.
Before dawn broke, a pretty golden-haired young woman of 22 arrived at Croydon Aerodrome to begin an epic solo flight to Australia. Miss Amy Johnson's aim is to beat the record of 15.5 days, put up by aviator Bert Hinkler.
I saw her off, quietly with a few friends. My wife was too full of tears to say goodbye. But by the time she reached the first stopover, every detail of her adventure had been broadcast to the world.
The young airwoman has made a perfect landing at Constantinople. The flying conditions were fine, she said, with a radiant smile.
Blown down in the desert by a sandstorm, the 22-year-old English girl used her flying bags to chock the wheels of her plane to prevent it being blown away. She waited 2 hours for the storm to pass, revolver in hand, lest any Arab tribesman might appear, as she had no idea what reception they might give a foreign intruder from the skies.
Miss Johnson was welcomed to a banquet on landing at Bandar Abbas in time for dinner. She certainly needed it, for the daily rations she takes with her are simply a thermos flask of tea, 1 orange, an apple, and sandwiches of tinned pâté de foie gras. A front strut.
The English solo girl flyer reached Karachi after 6 days flying and is now 3 days ahead of Bert Hinkler's 1928 record. Mr. Hinkler, a very experienced pilot and engineer, offered his congratulations. "Jolly good," was his comment.
Perhaps the greatest test of Miss Johnson's stamina was a short hop of 360 miles from Rangoon to Bangkok. Flying blind in heavy clouds and unable to take visual sightings, she climbed in a tiny aeroplane to 9,000 feet to avoid crashing into the mountainside.
Fortune continues to frown on brave flying girl Miss Johnson, but her spirit is rising splendidly to the occasion. Very tired, she confessed, crossing the Java Sea, I was flying for hours, only a few feet above sea level. I could not distinguish the waves from the sheets of monsoon rain, and was terrified that the sharks were waiting for my plane to fall.
Miss Johnson was forced to land on a sugar plantation clearing after running out of petrol in strong headwinds. The wings of her machine were ripped by bamboo planting sticks, but Miss Johnson was completely unruffled and repaired the fragile cloth with sticking plaster.
Engineers of the Surabaya Royal Air Company discovered a fault in the magneto, and Miss Johnson had the greatest difficulty holding back her tears. But a sporting local aviator, who also owns a Gypsy Moth, dispatched his reserve propeller and magneto for the English adventure.
Uneasiness is now being felt over the fate of Miss Johnson, as nothing has been seen of her for nearly 30 hours since she passed Beamer. She carries no wireless set on board.
The message of Miss Johnson's safe landing in Attenborough arrived just in time to stop 2 Dutch seaplanes being sent in search of her plane. A telegram was sent immediately to her worried parents.
Perilous Timor Sea. On finally reaching the Australian coast, Miss Johnson said she stood up in her cockpit and cheered. I threw down the sheath knife I wore for protection against agitated sharks and laughed and cried alternately as I turned towards Port Darwin.
I can tell you that I shouted for joy, and my wife gave a deep sigh of relief when the good news finally arrived.
Tell England, tell my mother and father, tell the rest of the world, I am here safe and sound and so happy. In a typically feminine gesture, she hurriedly combed her tousled hair for the throng of photographers waiting to record this most wonderful feat in the dawning history of man's dominion over the air.